You're listening to Tonebenders, the Sound Designers Podcast. Let's do this.
Hey everybody, welcome to Tonebenders. I will be your host today. I'm Tim Muirhead. We have a great episode for you today as we have three of the members of the sound crew on Quentin Tarantino's latest film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, sitting in with us today. But before we get to the interview, I just want to make a quick note about some technical difficulties we had during the interview. You're going to hear some clicks and clacks from the phone line. The choice was edit out big sections of the interview or just roll with it. And I think what they were saying was very interesting and worth keeping. So it might not be as sterling as we would have liked it. So let's introduce the guys. Harry Cohen, Leo Marcil, and Zach Goheen. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks.
Hello. Thank you.
Hi. Hello.
Thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us today. I want to tell you that I am obviously a big fan of Quentin Tarantino's previous films. And when I first saw the trailer for this, I was super excited. I went out opening weekend, saw it in 70 millimeter. And this film does not disappoint. It is a super fun film. It's just getting to hang out with the characters in the film is a joy. And it's also a joy sound-wise because there are actual moments in the film that we won't get into. By the way, this is going to be a spoiler-free podcast. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, we're not going to give away anything in particular. But there are points in the movie where sound is written into the script that cause a chain of events that is very important to the film. For instance, car engines that are very loud.
Yeah.
So you guys had to really step up and make sure that these sounds popped through and worked. Why don't we talk about the vehicles, first of all? How did you get the sounds of all those vehicles?
It started with one day of access to all the vehicles that are in the film. So we ended up being able to record 8 of them just in one day. So we had to make the most of our time and get exactly what we needed from each vehicle.
Yeah.
8 cars in one day?
Yeah.
Wow.
Also, multiple mic positions.
Yeah, we had 4 recorders going at a time. And yeah, we just kind of run and gun as much as information we could record.
Kind of had a pit crew kind of situation where it was while one guy is stripping mics off of the previous car, the next guy is, loading up mics on the next car and so forth.
Because, as you know, you could take up to a week just to do one car.
Yeah.
For sure.
But yeah, a lot of the main choices for editorial was the lav on the exhaust. Mic choice for all the exterior engines was usually the one used. And inside of the cars, we had the DPA 5100, which is a 6-channel microphone.
Yep.
So we either used as a 5.1 an LCR or chose a pair to use that sounded good for interiors that would also pick up a little the engine rumble to match the exterior.
Yeah.
I should interject here that we had to go through the recordings, the bits that we wanted to use, and isotope RX out all of the little rattles and stuff.
For sure.
Yeah.
A lot of these cars are really old, and a lot of mechanical problems are actually mechanic there on set. So if there was problems, which there were, they'd be able to fix them. A lot of rattling cars, a lot of old vintage. And
So let's set this up a little bit. You guys are told you got to record 8 cars in one day. How far into the process had you already started working on the film, or was this when they were actually shooting it?
No, we hadn't.
this was actually at the set off like a couple miles away from the set at a private parking lot.
Yeah.
Is actually where we were able to do it.
It was a Spawn Ranch set, right?
It was the Spawn set, Spawn Ranch set, and it was a couple miles next door. So we didn't hear any of the action of the production or anything.
Yeah.
So how did you know what you needed to get if you hadn't seen the cut yet? You were just kind of guessing, or?
We just kind of guessed. I think it was, we knew from the script that there was.
Yeah, we read the script and script notes, and we knew the Carmen Ghia was going to be a big car, and the Ford MG TD, the Roadster, that was a big character hero car player, and we knew Pacino was going to be in the Rolls Royce, so we wanted an authentic Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
And luckily, this is not a film that is full of car chases. We didn't have to get, any real aggressive driving.
We made sure hierarchies of what's going to be most important and what looks most interesting. And the Ford Galaxy, the old creepy crawler, it was one we recorded just because it was the biggest crapper in the.
Yeah.
And so we knew it's going to have some of the most interesting sounds to it.
Yeah. And we knew from the script, to your point, that that car plays a role where it's kind of, slowly driving into and through a neighborhood. So we made sure to get the the sound of the wheels on pavement by themselves.
And you actually had them turn the engine off so we could coast and get all the mechanism sounds, just the movement of the car itself without the engine. And you could use that for other cars, but really just to keep that one as an element of just creepy and nasty.
Yeah, kind of give it a sinister character just in the sound of the recording and itself. And we just kind of pointed the front of it downhill and threw it in neutral. Had the driver throw it in neutral and just had the mics out the window.
So how many people were on the crew for this shoot?
It was Leo and I, and then our great, wonderful assistant, Paola Migrans.
Mm-hmm. And we had outside hire Kai Paquin.
Yeah. And then Wiley as well, Wiley Statement there as well. So that was 4 of us being, working around each other, handing off mics, getting cars taped up and mic'd up. And we moved pretty efficiently. It was hot. It was August, but I think we made a pretty good use of our time. And we were kind of flying a little blind as far as knowing exactly what we needed to grab, but we just tried to grab as much as we could from each of the cars while we had them.
We knew what we wanted to mic ahead of time, which parts, so that was the big time saver.
How did you know?
Based on the models, we just knew like where the engine compartment's going to be, where the exhaust is going to be on each one.
Right.
Is that through previous experience or research?
Research. And these are all old cars, so you're dealing with carburetors and you're not,
Yeah, we actually recorded. Wiley had a Porsche as well. The same kind of a couple of years apart from that Porsche 911 that's in there.
Yeah.
That comes in handy.
Yeah. And, we're not totally exclusively relying on those recordings in the editorial. We're augmenting with other records, and Harry and Leo are both augmenting liberally with other records, but having a reference of what the actual sound of that car was always useful.
Which is important to Quentin, is to know that's the exact car sound from that era. Yeah. Or to bring it into the cutting room and have him say, that's the actual sound, but I want something more interesting.
It was pretty much those cars, though. I mean, we augmented just turned out to be just little bits here and there.
Yeah. I was going to say, Harry, for your work on the creepy crawler, there was additional layers on top of the car.
Yeah, there were. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that one was the most Frankenstein vehicle.
Yeah. The Galaxy, it sounded cool and everything, but we had to put in layers of all kinds of stuff. I mean, there was a layer that was a bolt being shaken in a can, for goodness sake.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about your design on that? It was pretty cool. I loved hearing the layers of that.
Because that one's a complete sound design.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was the original car, and there was some low-end process to bring out, the muffler sound and the bolt in the can, and some just like an old noisy steam engine sound.
Oh, cool.
And we layered all those together, and that was the creepy crawler.
And also thinking into the transition point to the next scene into the blender, there's mechanics that were made to match the cut into the blender, so it's kind of seamless transition.
Yeah.
Cool.
You kind of mentioned that at the beginning of the interview, that scene is a real interesting sound point because it starts off camera, and he hears it off camera and he notices it. So the sound directs the action of the scene from the get-go. And there is a transition between the interior of Leo's character making a drink in the blender and then the very mechanical and jalopy sound of the Ford Galaxy driving up.
Yeah, it comes up into our face really slowly, making the mechanical noise and rhythm, and then cuts to the blender making the same kind of mechanical noise until he doesn't notice, till he shuts off the blender that, there's a shitty car outside.
The edit during that scene and when he steps out into the street, it defies logic. It's like he shuts off the blender and he hears the engine muffler and he walks over towards the window and the sound gradually gets louder. But when he steps out into the street, we bring it back down again so that we can ramp it up again as he walks to the car.
Yeah. Playing that kind of tightrope walk of a mix where you're like, I can't keep going up and up. So how do I play the perspective of that?
Broke all the rules of audible physics. So.
For the sake of storytelling.
It worked. It didn't even occur to me when I was watching it in the film. So now I got to go rewatch it and figure that out.
Yeah.
So Harry mentioned earlier that there aren't any car chases really in the film, but that kind of obscures how much car there is in the film. There are long scenes of people driving regularly in the film.
Yeah.
So the cars are a major character in it. And there's also the scene, one of the characters' house is on a steep road that has a very sharp turn onto the regular street. And there are 2 or 3 shots of cars just ripping down that hill and skidding out onto the main road. So the cars were a really important element to kind of set the mood and kind of tell you about the person who is driving those cars, because the way they are driving informs kind of the kind of person that they are. So the cars were a super important part of the film. And that's why I'm interested in this car record session that you did, because it really helps sell the film. So you guys did the 8 cars in one day. You mentioned you had the DPA surround mic on the interior. What kind of mics were you using on the exterior?
We had another DPA, like the Law 4060.
4060, yeah.
And we also had a twin in the engine fan. And
another 4060 on the interior of the engine.
And we had 2 boomers outside with a Sennheisers.
Yeah, we had Sennheiser.
The 416 and a 418. We had the extended stereo.
There was the onboard mics, which are, as Leo said, the 4060 on the muffler and on the engine compartment, and the interior mics. But then we had
We also had the SM on an exhaust as well.
Oh, that's right.
For the other perspective.
Good old trusty SM58 on the exhaust.
Padded up.
Yeah.
Rolled in foam.
Yeah.
And then taped under and with a windshield.
Yeah. And then we had 3 people with handheld kit. So sound devices and Zoom recorders or what have you. I think Wiley was holding a 8040 stereo XY set, and I had a 418, the stereo 416 version. Kai had his mic. I forget what he was using, but those were the people. He had a Neumann. Yeah. Each of us had a handheld kit to get pass-bys.
Yeah, we were kind of in control of our own kits, just made sure we were in sync.
And everybody had a walkie, and we just kind of set up shop on different parts of the turns of the straightaway that we had. And I think one of the cool sounds that we were able to get with those pass-by stations was kind of that distant sound, especially with the MG, which is really loud and kind of farty sounding. You get that distant sound a block away from you. And that was really useful in the cut where he's kind of driving through the canyons of the Hollywood Hills. So you hear that kind of perspective shift of coming from camera, away from camera, and vice versa.
Yeah, those distant trails were vital.
So I saw a couple pictures from the shoot, and one of them had you, Zach, very epically running barefoot behind the car in midair, kind of in a balletic type pose, almost pointing a mic at the exhaust.
It's stupid, the things we do. It was one of those things. I was holding a handheld and was following the car, and I was hearing my own footsteps in my recording on my headset. You just quickly shed your shoes and get rid of it. So I was just following one of the cars barefoot and managed not to break my foot or hurt myself in the process. But
I recall one of your mics you actually had mounted with the extension. I think it was the
MG.
It was the little 8030 or which was the hypercardioid or the regular.
Yeah. So I have like a nice. It's actually been really useful.
That was a mic I chose to use a lot. On the record.
Just to kind of get the mic out from the muffler a little ways. And so it extends it off the back bumper.
Sorry, what is this? Like a stand?
It's like a C-clamped kind of arm you would use. I don't know. I think Manfrotto makes it or something. And it's just able to it's an armature that you can, position a mic on a desk or clamp it to a desk or what have you. But I've used that on car records where I clamp it to, where the bumper attaches to the body or some hard point on the back of the car, and then have it be drafted by the car itself and then back and it just pushes it off the muffler 18 inches, and it's enough to give you a little bit
that for the MG because it was so much pressure out of that exhaust. It was like an air gun.
Yeah,
compared to the others, it's just
a farty air gun. It's a really wonderful sounding car. It's really aggressive, and in the film it has such a aggressive. He drives it very aggressively.
A lot of aggressive driving. So we knew we got started with a lot of aggressive maneuvers recording.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The Cadillacs were the more cruisers that we had more basic maneuvers and turns and
nothing too fancy.
And just not to harp on this recording session too much, but I find it super interesting. So you had all those mics and they were going back into the car into what recorder?
The Zoom F8 was
F8?
And that was just to handle the 5100 because that ate up basically most of the channels. Mm-hmm. Everyone else had either all the mics from the car would go into if we didn't have enough F8, we had a sound device and it plugged the other ones and just sync them in the same car if we needed extra mics. And everyone else has their standalone, whether it was sound device or Zoom F8.
Yeah, I have a sound devices 633 that I love and will die with. And then I think Wiley had a 720 or 702.
But I'm pretty sure for majority, we just had the F8 in the interior of the car. We didn't need the 6 channel of the DPA because we weren't recording LFE. 3 remaining, which I think that housed all of our mics per car.
Right. The LFE is Harry's job.
Yeah. It's like the low end is generated from the regular recordings of the car. I pass them through a low pass filter and then do some trickery with some delays and stuff to generate a signal, which is tonal low end that tracks everything the car did.
Yeah.
Which was essential for these old cars to feel them when they come by.
For sure. So you spent a full day getting 8 cars with multiple recorders, multiple channels of the cars. Next morning, you show up at work and give all that to someone to make something out of. Whose job was that?
Hey, Leo, you want to do all the mastering of these car recordings? So yeah, that was on his plate.
Yeah, I got handed all the SDs and they're slapped on my table, and then a massive library to sync up, and that's where it began with for cars. And then the car editorial did happen pretty quickly after that. Picture, we started working on picture before it was done shooting.
Yeah. So Leo was on the project longer than anyone.
I started in the cutting room with Fred Raskin and Quentin.
Yeah.
So they can get little demo mixes done, and as they're going, so they could imagine the scenes with the somewhat of a full sound spectrum, at least the essentials in the scene.
Mm-hmm. Which seems to be kind of a running thing now, I guess, listening to this show and other people talk about it in interviews, that seems to be a trend now of putting sound editorial in with the picture editorial.
And we'd like to say that I think Wiley actually started that trend.
Yeah, it's a very effective use of everyone's time. And Leo was in there early with Fred and Quentin, cutting cars, cutting all kinds of sounds just to get the edit working.
And whatever they requested, he was right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to say picture editors trying to jump in themselves and find a gunshot or a car or something way out of their realm and they want it done right, and it's a Quentin film, so it made sense to
have an actual editor
on get editorial done at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'd like to say at this time, we started with Kill Bill, and in Kill Bill, they showed up with a fully filled out OMF, all these sounds that they had put together. And through the years, with every project that we've done, we've finally managed to get him to where we get the OMF back, and it is pretty much just our track that we sent him.
Wow, that's a luxury.
Yeah, it's kind of this like ping pong game where we there's a lot of weird communication happening through OMF in a way. Leo's on the editorial side and is feeding Fred sounds, and they'll send us a cut of a reel, and that OMF will have some percentage of the original tracks that we made, and then some percentage of new material that they cut in, and some percentage of material that they, flew in from Leo. And it's just this constant like ping pong where we're reincorporating new stuff, but then carrying forward the stuff that we had previously. And as the iterations go forth, hopefully the percentages lean more towards it's all our stuff. And as Harry's saying, by the time we get towards the final mix, we can just look at the OMF and it's our tracks.
And that's what happened on this one. We were getting towards going into Sony, and the OMS came back as still has our names on it as our printed tracks. And unless there's a new scene or cut, conform.
And you can see what they did by just the cuts that were done on the OMF. It's funny. It's like you don't even need to email each other or a change list or anything. You can just look at an OMF and see like, oh, there's a difference here. And oh, they must not have liked that shot because they cut it out. So you interpolate their intentions by what they chose to use and not use.
By the time we get to this stage with Quentin, his notes are very precise and limited. There's not a whole track list of stuff.
We have very limited access to Quentin's time. It's just a very fluid situation with the cut changing rapidly from day to day. And I think we had 2 weeks with Quentin at the final mix, which is very, very quick for a film of this sort, just because most of the sound he's already heard.
Yeah, he's familiar with the whole track by the time it hits the stage.
He's not hearing anything new when on that first playback of the first day on the Sony Dub.
So he's
stage.
already coming in with his notes.
Yeah.
He's already, he knows what he wants. So.
Yeah.
So how does it work when you're embedded with the picture department, Leo? Like, are you actually in the room with like a laptop and headphones, or do you have your own edit suite and they come and grab you when they need you? Or
well, I had my full editing suite, so I have full 5.1, and I had S3 and my MIDI controls and design tools. So I had everything I would normally have.
Perfect.
And so it was actually, it was nice. It could have been soundproofed a little better.
Yeah, the trend, I guess, for a long time now is, these aren't edited in a facility. They basically just rent a house for a year and create edit suites out of bedrooms and living rooms.
So being in there, they're just a knock on the door away, or instead of an email tracing back and forth or a call, can I get this? Can I have that? It was just immediate, and they could go through different iterations of a scene of like, oh, I like this, I don't like this, and they can have it, and then a print for them and Quentin to play back at the end of the day or end of the week, and that was very beneficial for them. They really like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
for sure. So another thing that I wanted to talk about is we mentioned the Spawn Ranch earlier. There's a scene that takes place on within the plot of the film. It's a kind of retired movie set for Westerns. And Brad Pitt's character shows up. And most of the film has RT going constantly. There's radio or television going in the background for a lot of the film. And then we arrive at the Spawn Ranch, and a lot of that goes away. And we're left with a much quieter soundtrack. But it's super eerie as well. It's not a comfortable scene for the main character in it. So how did you guys go about tackling this ambience for that section?
That was an expressed desire from very early on to not do score.
Yeah, we knew there was never going to be score at that scene from any point of it. But they knew they wanted it to be really scary and bear a lot of tension. So we knew it was going to be designed.
But it's still somewhere without crossing over totally into a horror movie territory.
Yeah, we didn't want to go for the cheese fest of just tonal rumbles.
Scraping cymbals and really, the obvious thing. You don't want to cross over into horror.
We were trying to really just score it with design, with organic design.
Yeah. And so what do you use in in organic real world sounds that kind of give you that uneasy feeling? So there's dogs barking off screen.
The dogs were a big player, which he made a whole orchestra that comments on things at times. And it's...
Yeah, if you notice, there's constant dog barkings, but it's always in between the dialogue.
Yeah. Funny how that works out. I always joke about that watching films with my wife, where you're like, notice how that dog never barks while they're talking? Like it's that kind of thing where they're very specifically placed.
No, they're really well-trained dogs.
Yeah, they're very well-trained dogs. Flies and insects and...
A lot of wind.
Yeah, some whistling winds and tree rustles and...
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we did all kinds of metal sounds and...
Yeah, bed creaks that just...
Yeah.
Some window slaps and you should talk about what you're recording, which is rhythmically throughout the whole scene.
When I first started editing on that scene, I brought in some material that I had recorded years ago, I think 2015, going up to Death Valley and just camping for a week and recording around the park and had a whole library of stuff that I had just accumulated from going up there a lot. And one of the things I had recorded was this aero motor, which is, it when you see it, it's like the windmill kind of thing that they use to pump water into livestock reservoirs. There was, an old rusty one in the middle of a field, and the wind was gusting and it was turning with that, and it kind of just had that rusty, grindy sound.
Very indirect, off-putting sound.
Yeah. It's a sound that doesn't feel designed. It feels natural, but
it's like something's making that sound and it makes sense in the scene.
Yeah. And Wiley got really into it. He was very excited about that sound. I love that sound, but it was definitely a player that got a lot of attention in there. And there was also,
Also, there's the birds, the crows.
Yeah, there's ravens.
The coyotes. There's other animals playing and commenting on things. Even the horse vocals, they're treated to sound vicious in the background that are kind of ghostly and not as pure and natural as they would be.
They're not friendly.
How do you treat a horse to sound vicious?
I mean, there's just pitching and some reverbs and slapping them around the atmosphere that just made it darker.
Yeah.
Slapping the echo around, not actually slapping the horses, right?
No, I mean...
Somebody had to slap the horses.
Somebody's slapping the horses.
I would say that one person who's not on this conversation, Sylvain Lesueur, did a lot of really great work with the winds as well.
He uses a Kima, which is a machine that does algorithms that creates one-of-a-kind wind textures that you can create them from all different kinds of elements. That the source doesn't have to be wind, but create these windly.
Very like highly designed, like,
and that's his specialty. So I can't even speak. Speak on it.
We don't know what he does, but it's magic.
The result is beautiful,
amazing. We had worked on that show Godless together.
I love that show. That was a really good show.
Yeah. So he did a lot of wins for that. So we kind of carried that forward into this one as well.
And he started that work on Hateful Eight.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Yes.
So another set piece isn't the right word, but another prop that's featured in the film early on is there's a memory sequence where we see Leonardo DiCaprio's character using a giant flamethrower. Did you guys record anything special for that, or how did you build that flamethrower?
That's a Harry Cohen special right there.
Here we go, Harry.
I've done a lot of work with fire, especially on a film called Deepwater Horizon. But on the flamethrower, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I recorded a little scripto. It's like a lighter, a charcoal lighter or something. But I just used lots of layers of different elements, vocal elements and animal elements and fire elements, and we just mixed them together and came up with the flamethrower.
Yeah, and those are all they're delivered to the stage, in various levels and various layers where, there's straight flame layers, but then there's a whole layer that is more kind of beastly, growly, screamy.
And what I like is the low end dynamic of it. You feel it coming across the screen, which
Yeah.
You got to keep it moving, but for my taste, I think it could have been, more vocal, more mouthy.
But what did you use do you know what animal screams those are?
Offhand, no, but there are horses and there are tigers. I think some chameleons.
Was there some laser action in there?
It's possible.
We've worked together on some stuff, so we get to know each other's sounds.
The cool thing about the flamethrower is that when it's used in the film, I was in a sold out screening and flamethrower is used. Everyone is like taken aback and gasps, and then it stops and it's the super powerful flamethrower. And then everyone started laughing, which in the context of the moment, it was not necessarily a funny thing as much as just like a release that we all had the same reaction to. And it was a really great communal moment that you don't necessarily get in films that much anymore. There's a couple scenes in that where everybody in the audience just kind of exhaled at the same time or laughed at the same time in a way that was like, it's okay, everybody, we're going to get through this, okay?
Yeah.
And it was really fun to see in a theater. So anybody that's listening to this, go see it in the theater. It is worth it.
Quentin has a way of building moments like that. I remember in Kill Bill, there was a scene where Lucy Liu cuts off the Yakuza guy's head and there's blood spurting up. And he did it in such a rhythm that it gets a laugh. I mean, here's a guy with his head cut off and he makes it funny.
Talent.
I think it's just so over the top and then +1. And then at that point, it's funny.
And on the sounds, in terms of sound, the flamethrower pins the needle as far as your, frequency spectrum is concerned. You're making all the paper woofers rattle. So
from the story point, it's just they get what's coming.
Yeah, yeah. It's a pretty fun instrument to wield, I suppose, in real life. But it also on the soundstage, it's fun to wield that instrument as well.
Yeah, it would be pretty fun to wield in real life. You're right. It would be pretty crazy.
Haven't yet done that. Someday.
Leo really did.
Yeah. That's actually him doing
Who did? Oh, Leo DiCaprio. Yes, of course.
Yeah, not me.
Different Leo.
So I just want to take a moment to say something for Harry's benefit. Harry, in 2017, I believe, you won the Lifetime Achievement Award from the MPSE.
Yeah, it was a tremendous surprise.
I wasn't in the room, but you can see the video online of you getting the award. And when they call out your name, the crowd cheers in a way that is not a polite cheer. It's a "we love you" cheer. I don't know if that makes sense, but like you are respected in the industry in a way that I'm not sure many other people are. Since we started this podcast, so many people have, when we're done the interview, been like, that was fun. You know who you should have on the show? You got to get Harry. Harry's the best. So I just wanted to pass that along to you, Harry, that you are an extremely respected person, and whatever you've done, keep it up because people love you.
Well, thank you very much for that.
In your acceptance speech for that Lifetime Achievement Award, we're going to just veer off the film just for a sec. You talked about the idea of how mentorship is kind of changing in the world of audio post right now. And that's something that we've talked a lot about on this podcast. So I just wanted to see what your current thoughts on it are. The problem, obviously, is that back in the day, in the 80s, 90s, earlier, all these films had a bunch of interns and a bunch of people who were learning the craft as they got to work on the projects. And that system is kind of going away. Have you found any ideas for new ways to tackle this at all, Harry?
Only specifically what I encounter. Leo started as my intern as well. In the 80s and stuff, we had opportunity to hire interns from various places, most notably Full Sail. And that gave us an opportunity to check them out. And the good ones, I would just tell them, here's how it's going to go. We're going to pay you like, dirt for a year. But at the end of that year, you'll have real credits on real film and experience. And either you will have made yourself so essential to the process that will hire you, or else you can just go and get a job elsewhere. But that changed. I guess there were some interns who went through the program at other facilities and stuff and didn't get hired, and they complained to the union. So the union instituted a rule where if you want to have an intern, they're making like a salary of about 2/3 of what a regular editor would make. So a sound supervisor is faced with the choice of hiring, an intern at 2/3 the price, or just throw in the extra third and get an experienced guy. So that whole thing went away, sort of. So it was real unfortunate. And I know there have been several efforts and several programs to, institute that kind of a thing of passing your learning, to the next generation and whatever. But I've like aged out of the main thrust of that. So it just is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know what the answer is moving forward because people aren't learning the way they used to learn. And
no, the industry has changed because nowadays there are all of these sound effects libraries that you can purchase, and if you're an editor today, you have all of this material which was unavailable to us back in the day. So it's different and it's faster, and that's just what it's become.
But the materials are there. There's more material out there to purchase online, but the techniques that go into making good design are still it's still a craft. And I consider myself super fortunate. I know Leo does too, to have had time to go up and spend and nerd out with Harry about like, what do you do? How did you do this? What's this thing? And he's so generous with his knowledge. He's so generous with his time, and is not at all, Harry, if I may say. I don't see you. I meet so many people that have been in the industry for so long that they just kind of have this, I just kind of, they kind of call it in, or they phone it in after a while, or they have kind of a over it attitude. And Harry's like, he's a child in a sandbox of sound still. He loves his life source is getting new source material and going after a new sound. And it's really inspiring to, youngish guys like myself who get to just get going in the industry and see how you can still be at Harry's level and still have fun. And
he's done the research. It's hard to compete with the man. I'll be like, look at this new plugin he's like, oh, I've been playing with that for weeks.
Yeah, exactly. He knows about the new thing before the new thing came out. Like, you think that yeah, he's on top of the latest and greatest, more so than any other person I know.
Well, thank you guys very much.
Yeah, sorry to gush about you, Harry. We like work, and that goes to Timothy's point of the applause was in that auditorium. It's not just us that feel that way.
For sure. So by extension, am I to assume that Leo was one of your better interns? So you kept him, you didn't kick him to the curb there?
No, Leo's just an average intern. No, I'm just kidding. He's a very talented individual, and coming on the scene, and I've encouraged him to explore the mixing aspect as well as the design aspect in light of today's climate, and I think he's done that very well.
Well, thank you. And Harry's been nothing but the best mentor you could imagine having. And
yeah,
you could sit there for one day in his room just being a fly watching him work and learn an enormous amount, and then imagine sitting there for a year straight, and it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And humbling. And
yeah.
Okay, that's enough of kissing Harry's butt.
Yeah, okay,
that's enough. Yeah.
Part 2.
So Zach, what was your main role in terms of sound editorial on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I kind of was cleanup. I kind of came in, like I said, Leo had been on the project the longest. I came in for 2 months, 3 months, 2.5 months of work. And Harry had been on for a while as well. And I came in just to kind of help the final pushes towards the Sony stage mix. And then went over to the Sony stage and helped things along there. I kind of just filled in a lot of gaps in a lot of different places. I don't know if there was any like specifics part that I had a major hand in outside of those Death Valley recordings for Spawn Ranch. But otherwise, the other thing that was big on this project that is also part of the evolution of the industry that we're seeing is we cut a lot of things that would be later on, or that would have been done by foley.
Okay.
We had cut footsteps. We had cut cloths and whatnot from previous foley recordings, or our own foley, or
MIDI design,
or MIDI foley. And some of that was redone later by Gary Hecker on the foley stage, but some of it maintained and carried through into the mix. And
I'd say 80% to 90% is handcrafted, and 10% came from the stage with Gary. And those were for just details to make the movie glisten, just fun stuff that we didn't want to waste time with on the stage that we have recorded so many times for so many big films. We don't need those hand pats again and those coat grabs, and we have that crap.
Cigarette puffs. A lot of cigarette puffs on this one. So we're using stuff from our library of previous recordings and just cutting them by hand, and then anything that's new that we need to get special we'll program for Gary.
Yeah, any special stuff like Pacino's suit we want a one-of-a-kind suit, or the hero characters, Leo's jacket. We want his leather jacket to be 60s badass, and we want to hear it. There's just specific stuff, the hero stuff, Foley-wise, is what we got recorded that we really wanted to be unique, and that you're going to know, you're going to hear it. And
so my what I contributed a lot of was cutting Foley in, and then, programming stuff for Gary.
Which is crucial, because with Quentin Tarantino, he loves Foley, and he loves the smallest detail of each Foley cut. He wants to know that there's the grit under the shoe, then the leather is creaking as he's stepping on the piece of grit, and it's a wood floor that you hear the creak too.
Yeah.
And he wants to know all these elements are there, and that
it's one of those things that you everybody here on this conversation and maybe listening to this podcast understands, but the Joe Schmo doesn't understand that it's a kind of magical layer when Foley is done well. And Wiley and Harry on previous Quentin movies, and Gary, when it's done well, it creates such a premium to the soundtrack that you can't, when it's not there, it just totally blows your mind how much of a lift it is. And it's the smallest details. I mean, one of my favorite is the ring on the glass when he grabs his drink. You know, you hear a ting of his ring, his wedding ring, or I don't know if it's wedding ring, hit the glass, you know. And then Pacino, as he's gesticulating at the Musso and Frank's dinner table, he's gesticulating with his hands, and every once in a while his hands like hit the table and you hear a clunk of his ring on the table. Because he's this, movie executive and he's got a big chunky ring on.
And their chains too. Just to hear their neck, for that time period that was popular to have the gold chain and the turtleneck, and to hear that chain to make you, a lot of nostalgia.
Those things are just beautiful, sparkly, we call it this kind of sheen on top of the soundtrack that gives it this production value, and always, like anything else, doesn't get in the way of the dialogue. It's cut around the dialogue, it's cut in the gaps, and it just makes the whole movie shine.
It's having all of those little details consistently throughout is what makes it such a thick film, thick sound-wise.
Yeah.
Wiley sits there and he just always is asking for more detail throughout the course of the mix. Little things he notices, and he just never stops.
Yeah, and even all recorded Foley is absolutely sweetened. Yeah. Each one with layers. It's everything becomes a sound effect in a Quentin film. Every piece does. So it's all rich with layers.
And it's like any other film, I guess, but especially on working with Wiley and on this film, the line between what is Foley and what is effect, it's like, I guess you're just creating this massive Foley track. It feels like, but it's a beautiful thing, and it's a really
it's a lot of fun too.
It's fun to just keep going deeper into the details. Like when you think you've got the scene held together, it's fun to just be like, what about that brush that goes by in the foreground? Can we make a whoosh on, like just making those little lifts as you add to the film. It's felt but not heard at some times, but it definitely helps.
Yeah, a lot of what we do is almost subliminal.
And then it's like design inside Spawn Ranch, inside the house, like bad plumbing inside of the walls that Harry created. Very subtle, but it creates these bad vibes that are going on.
Yeah, bad plumbing.
But everything's sweet. The cars, even a lot of the pass-bys there, we used boat motors that are more interesting than the actual car itself going by. Those old outboards make a gluggity-glug that's more interesting than the 60s whatever Firebird going gluggity-glug. It was the boat motor would read through and sound better, and a lot of crazy stuff to make it sound more real than the real.
Yeah, real's no fun. It's being true to the actual car sound or actual gun sound. I've learned this from Harry more than anyone. It's like, I think when I first started working with Harry, I was like, oh, so did you use, the accurate sound of that prop and what it makes? And he's like, no, I used the one that sounded the best. And I think that's so key. Like the car by in the background doesn't have to be, a Plymouth, a 1968 Plymouth. It can be a Johnson outboard boat motor because it just cuts through the music and the din of the mix so much better and sounds cooler.
Which we had to work with the music a lot of music scores or music pieces, nothing composed.
So let's talk about a particular kind of storytelling element in the film. With Leonardo DiCaprio character is an actor, and there is a moment where he is shooting a scene of a TV show that he's working on, and we as the viewer kind of cut between the actual kind of final project of what he's shooting and being on set. How did you guys tackle that sound-wise? Did you change what we're hearing a bit when we're going between those two?
I don't think there's much of a mix move there.
That scene where he breaks character and says line.
Yeah.
Up until, exactly.
For that, we built a classic Western, full-on Western background with heightened town and everything we purposely made it very busy going on, and horses and outside, people hollering and wagons going by. So when it comes down to him cutting character, we pull everything but Mark Ulano's production. So it brings out everything from surrounds all the way to into a one mono raw production.
Yeah.
So it's to turn it real for a moment, and then as he says action and back, it opens back up into the Western world.
Right. Which is kind of exactly what we were just talking about. It's like taking away the sheen of what we do, which is all of the like added layers of background and all of the Foley and all of that stuff that you shouldn't notice, but just make it feel like a movie. when you cut it out to just be the mono production dialogue, it sounds flat.
We experimented with like, let's make production noises and let's make it like they're kicking the lights and moving the cameras, but then without any of that and just tried just the production.
Well, except for we put in the sound of the camera re-racking on the rails.
Yeah, when he says let's start from one, and then Harry put the camera rolling back into place, and then action, and then the horse goes back up and the fan starts spinning and the wagons are back and everyone's.
It's a super effective technique. Like when it was a really magical moment in the film, the way you guys transition there, it's super cool.
And that was when we had the battle early on. They wanted to know how we were going to do that. Mm-hmm. So we went through a couple of experiments, and that finally was the easiest one that we didn't do, was just pull everything and have a mono production down the center. And that was the winner. And then have the girl off stage reading the line, and just being that bland was the best.
And there's a lot of that in this film of movie sets as a scene, like the scene of the film that we're watching is taking place on a movie set or on a lot. So we built, or Harry and Leo, I actually wasn't much part of this, built a lot of backgrounds of just movie sets. And that was an interesting thing, is like, what does a movie set sound like? It sounds different than a city or neighborhood, but it can't be too on the nose, and it can't be too.
Those are whole canvases themselves to build. Those are just starting blank. You had to start for those backgrounds with group wallas and then construction pieces.
There was a lot of construction use.
And then still you wanted some horses that were around production, still neighing and stuff.
Yeah.
And then not their Showtime neighs though. Not and whinnies and some vocals, and then people dropping stuff, a couple hammering and
because a movie set is ultimately a construction site.
But there's no file you're going to find in the library that was going to work. You had to build each background for the whole movie had to be built.
Yeah,
with lots of layers.
Yeah, little just small hammer here, and then
make sure it differentiates from when they say action into the Western world. Now it's just Western material. It's just what's in that world.
But like during the Bruce Lee section, like that's on a set, so you have to have a very subtle background that feels like it is from a set. And actually what I did it late in the game. We were on the Sony lot, and the Bruce Lee section was kind of like a little limp as far as the backgrounds. I don't think we had Lindsay.
It was a hard scene. Everyone was just so still.
Yeah. Like you have background action from characters. There's extras in the background, but none of them are talking or moving. And the ones that are talking, we programmed for Lindsay Alvarez did ADR with us. She was a big part of our team and super helpful.
And even that group we had to turn down because these people were not very animated. They're just the one guy smoking.
A lot of cigarette puffs. But Lindsay had programmed ADR, group ADR, for those few moments where it does exist, but I don't think we had it in yet. Some of the feedback that we were experiencing on the stage was like, it just feels too dead. I ended up going out late we were working weekends. And so during the weekend, the Sony lot was pretty ghost town. So I actually went out with a stereo pair of mics and just recorded an actual the background sound of a lot, which is mostly a lot of AC generators, the occasional like craft services guy loading into a loading dock or that kind of thing. And if you get that kind of distant perspective, it just has a little bit of texture.
But what we did with that actually was put it center.
Yeah.
Because it filled the center, and then we used the shipyard.
Yeah, a lot of the shipping
yard
kind of sounds.
Yeah. Harry, what was your favorite sound moment in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
It's really hard to say. I guess it would be part in that we're considering a spoiler.
And is this his favorite sound or just favorite one to cut or edit?
However he wants to go.
I of course the flamethrower, of course the vintage, the vintageization of sounds when he is in
the Italian vintage show.
Let's talk about the vintageization. Wow, I can't say that word. Do you want to go into that, Harry?
So I originally came up with a chain that would make stuff sound like it was recorded in the 1930s for Inglourious Bastards, which has a movie inside the movie. And for that movie, inside the movie, we flew to Berlin and posted that there. And we were experimenting with different ways to make it a vintage sound. But ultimately, it wound up being this chain. this just crazy a chain of plugins. It was like it took 2 auxes, one aux with 8 plugins into another aux with several more.
Is this for the Italian sequence?
Yeah, and it was a question of whether we wanted to be period accurate in all of that sound, and in some scenes we were, and in other scenes, like at the beginning of the film, opens up with a period piece, but we decided that we didn't want to just present the audience with that kind of sound at the beginning of the film. So the soundtrack just goes in and out of the various eras, as it were.
And now you're going to go through and tell us each of the plugins and the settings that you used on that chain, right, Harry?
If I could remember them. It's like all of the non-obvious ones. And I used some Native Instruments Reactor plugins. I remember I used the Equalizer plugin, and just a whole bunch of stuff.
Again, it ain't the tools, it's how you use them. But also it's the tools.
Thank you very much, guys, for talking to us about this today. I had a really great time listening to you guys tell the stories. It's a super fun movie that is fun to talk about because it has layers to it that aren't just there's an explosion, so we hear an explosion. There's stuff being told in the story subtly in the background that affects the way you feel about the characters without you knowing, and that is my favorite kind of sound design, and it's something that I really appreciate, and I know that people listening to this show really appreciate. So Harry, Zach, and Leo, thank you very much for talking with us today, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime in the future.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, before we wrap this up, I just want to send out a huge thanks to Adriana Gomez. She's a sound editor, sound designer, and Foley artist. She's worked on different projects with indie filmmakers, podcast producers, visual effects artists, and advertising companies from many different countries. She's currently working on her first Foley SFX library to share online. She jumped in and edited this episode like a rock star. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you head to our website, to the page for this episode, you can find links to her IMDb, her Twitter account, and her website, adrianacomposer.com. That's www.andreinacomposer.com. So go check her out. She was awesome to work with, great talent. Also, head to our website for this episode, and you can see tons of pictures of the recordings of the cars that they did that we talked about for about the first half of this episode. So there's a bunch of pictures there. There's also a picture from the soundstage of the whole sound crew with Quentin Tarantino. So head there and check it out, tonebenderspodcast.com. Thanks for listening. We'll get back to you guys soon. Stay tuned.
Tonebenders is produced by Timothy Muirhead, Renee Coronado, and Teresa Morrow. Theme music is by Mark Strait. Send your emails to info@tonebenderspodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter via @TheTonebenders, and join Tonebenders Podcast on Facebook. Support this podcast. You can use our links when you shop with Amazon or B&H, or leave us a tip. Just go to tonebenderspodcast.com and click the support button. Thanks for listening.